Well, hello, America. Tonight, I want to zoom out on the economic chaos that is brewing all about our lives. It has been a wild couple of weeks since President Trump announced his Liberation Day tariffs. Yeah, there he is. Markets are all jittery, twitching like AOC at a Trump State of the Union speech. First, they're down because of all the tariffs, and they're way up because of Trump's 90-day pause, and then they're way down. All the globalists are absolutely losing their minds because the Trump tariffs are an attempt to take a sledgehammer to the post-World War II economic order. This is the thing that I don't think anybody's really explaining that is so important to understand. Otherwise, this is just a roller coaster ride, and there's no thrills in it for me, at least. I don't really like scary roller coaster rides, especially when, our whole life is at stake. That's what it feels like to most people because they don't understand why this is being done. The order that has been bleeding America dry for decades is the world order that we established right after World War II. And it is destroying America. And when I say America, I mean middle America, regular hardworking America, red state America. You see, globalization has worked out great for all of the American elites. A whole buttload of them got a whole lot richer. But for you, most likely, you've been wondering what the heck happened to the American dream. Elites saw globalization as curing global poverty, providing cheap goods for Americans, fueling overall economic growth. But for millions of Americans, that has not been the experience at all. Instead, they see that there used to be good jobs out there for them in their own communities. And now those jobs are either very, very scarce or most likely gone altogether. Job security is a thing of the distant past for these Americans, much less for their children and their grandchildren. They don't even know if they have a future that's better than their parents did. Working class Americans being able to buy cheaper stuff is helpful to an extent, but it does not make up for losing a steady, meaningful job in their community with a sense of belonging and purpose that comes with that. Globalization versus the American dream is, in a nutshell, what the past decade or so has been all about in U.S. politics. With all of the turmoil and the speculation and the noise of the past 2 weeks, I think it's time to take a breath for a minute, pull back, get some perspective, see how we got here, and what is it the president is trying to do. What has this whole process done to us? Well, we have to start at the beginning. So let's rewind for a minute to just after World War II. America won and basically became the free world's sugar daddy. We were the only ones that weren't destroyed in the free world. So we decided it would be the morally right thing to help Europe recover. So we rebuilt Europe with the Marshall Plan at a cost of $13 billion. In today's dollars, that's more than $150 billion. We turned Japan from rubble into an industrial powerhouse at a cost of another $2.2 billion, which would be $31 billion today. Then we paid for the vast majority of Europe's defense through NATO, while they sipped espresso and built a welfare state on our dime. Now, the U.S. still is paying almost 16% of NATO's annual budget, even though there are 32 member nations now. Why are we doing that? So what has the post-World War II deal been? Well, America is the benefactor. It was noble of us, I guess, and necessary in some ways. We want to make sure that the West is stable. We needed to rebuild those countries. It was the right thing to do, and it was the only way we could hold ourselves together. People without jobs, without a country, it doesn't make for a good outcome. The problem is it wasn't sustainable, and we've been doing it. Now, fast forward to 1970, okay? President Nixon first comes out, and he decides, well, we have the welfare state that we want, and we want big war all the time. So we couldn't do both and stay on the gold standard. There wasn't enough gold. We had to start printing money. So he takes us off the gold standard in 1971. So we're no longer tethered to any economic reality. Now, that freaks the world out because something else we did right after the war is we had the Bretton Woods Agreement. Bretton Woods was a meeting that we had back in the 1940s, right after the war, and we said, hey, there's not enough gold. You guys just take our dollars, and it'll be just as good as gold. You ever want gold, you just bring it to us. We'll give you $1. A paper dollar will be worth $1's worth of gold, and we can give it to you, and you can cash it in at any time. Well, we went off of that in the 1970s. In fact, France, who even knew they had warships, they sent warships over to New York City. Did you know that? Yeah, early 1970s, they were over going, hey, we want our gold. Well, instead of giving everybody their gold, we wanted the dollar to be the king, so we cut a couple of deals. First, we would buy the world's stuff. We had been the manufacturer. We made all of the washing machines. We made all of the cars. We made all of the refrigerators, the televisions, and everything else. And so when the rest of the world said, hey, what are you doing? You're going off the gold standard, and we're not going to hold your dollar because you'll just get out of control in spending. We said, oh, no, we'll never do that. And the only spending we're going to do is we're going to buy your stuff because now you need to produce all of that stuff, and we'll just be the consumer. Well, that might be good for a little while, but not for all of these decades. The second thing that we did is we put oil priced in dollars. We made a deal with the Saudis, and we said, hey, OPEC, only deal in U.S. dollars. So now everybody was forced to save the dollar if they wanted to have oil. That was the petrodollar, and that's when that was born. Okay, sounds great because it has the word dollar in it, except this whole system helped gut America and American factories. America bought the world's stuff, and we propped up everyone else while the heart of the U.S. manufacturing began just rusting away. Now, fast forward to the 1990s. Political elites in Washington, they see all of this. They know what's going on. They see the cracks in our system. But do they fix it? No. They decide it's better for us just to decline. They just managed our decline. That's where the North America Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, comes in. It was signed in by President Clinton in 1993. NAFTA was hyped as, removing trade barriers between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Sounds good. I'm a free trade guy. Free trade, going to be the ticket, right? It would bring demand back for exports and jobs and prosperity for all. Listen to how President Clinton put it at the time.
My fellow Americans, bit by bit, all these things are creating the conditions of a sustained global expansion. As significant as they are, our goals must be more ambitious. The United States must seek nothing less than a new trading system that benefits all nations through robust commerce. To the men and women of our country who were afraid of these changes and found in their opposition to NAFTA an expression of that fear, what I thought was a wrong expression and what I know was a wrong expression, but nonetheless represented legitimate fears. The gains from this agreement will be your gains too.
Wow. There's a lot to dissect in that. He heard your concerns and said they were wrong because the gains from this agreement would be your gains as well. Sounds great if it were true. The promised prosperity never showed up. The NAFTA winners were Mexico and Canada. Remember, he started that whole thing with expanded global trade. NAFTA turned Mexico into a manufacturing haven. U.S. companies, including Ford and GM, raced across the border for cheaper labor and to make auto parts and electronics. During the first 7 years of NAFTA, Mexico added 1 million new manufacturing jobs. Good for Mexico, not good for us. In 1993, Mexico's exports to the U.S. totaled almost $40 billion. By 2000, those exports totaled under $136 billion, over 300% growth in 7 years of NAFTA. The U.S. now has a trade deficit with Mexico ranging from $15 to $171 billion every single year since 1994. What does that mean? That means we're buying a lot of stuff, but we're not selling a lot of stuff. We're not making stuff. We're buying stuff. What about Canada? Well, they hit the NAFTA jackpot as well. At the end of 1993, when NAFTA was signed, Canada enjoyed almost an $11 billion trade surplus with the U.S. By the year 2000, that surplus was over $52 billion. And just like we have with Mexico, the U.S. has a trade deficit with Canada between $13 and $78 billion every year since 1994. It's a sweet deal if you're Canadian. Now, look, I have no problem with prosperity all over, everywhere. I don't want to hurt other countries, but I do think it's right for us to care about our country to make sure it doesn't slide into the abyss. Meanwhile, while all that's happening, by 2000, the U.S. had over 766,000 job losses related to NAFTA. Where's your prosperity? Some states were hit harder than others, but NAFTA-related job losses affected all 50 states. American factories became empty shells. Now, that's just not a stat. That was 766,000 families wondering, how are we going to pay our mortgage? I want you to look at this chart. This is total U.S. manufacturing jobs since 1993. Not all of those losses were related to NAFTA, but it's still a remarkable swan dive right off a cliff. The Carolinas were two of the hardest hit states because of NAFTA's effect on the textile industry. Try to buy something made in America. As production migrated to Mexico, North Carolina lost over 10,000 textile jobs. The first decade of NAFTA saw textile jobs in South Carolina drop from 120,000 to 49,000. And it wasn't just the textile industry. Auto plants in Michigan, steel towns in Ohio, same story. Michigan had the most NAFTA-related job losses in the nation, just behind California. Even as they passed NAFTA, the elites were talking about retraining American workers. 30 years later, we're still saying the same thing. You remember when Joe Biden was going nuts on his climate change bill, codenamed the Inflation Reduction Act? Well, all these jobs were going to disappear. America's oil and gas and coal industries gone. And what did he tell those workers? Well, learn to code. How's that working out? Build solar panels. How's that working out? Like I said, managed decline. NAFTA drained the lifeblood from our small communities when the mills and the factories went silent. I want you to listen to former Vice President Al Gore the day NAFTA was signed. Listen.
We understand the concerns and fears of those who opposed this agreement. We respect their disagreement. But let me state our simple conviction that NAFTA will be good for our country, good for working men and women, and good for the future of our hemisphere.
Is any of that true? Was this progress? Or was this a colossal mistake or betrayal for some who really knew? Main Street boarded up all over the country. How's that good for working Americans? The elites promised exports would be great for all Americans. Instead, they mostly exported our jobs. So now Trump comes along with his tariff talk, and he is not messing around. He does not want to tweak America's trade here and there. He wants to reverse the entire system of managed decline, because that's the choice that everybody is leaving out on all of the other TV shows. They're like, this is bad. This is going to be bad for the economy. Is that really free trade, or what's free trade? How about this is the choice? We either do something dramatic and try to restart the engine of America, or we all sign in for managed decline. I don't want managed decline. They all won't even admit that there's a problem. At least this guy understands there's a deep problem. Now, the markets are freaking out because they've been addicted to this game for decades. I don't know if tariffs are the ticket. I have my doubts. I am not. I had a half-hour conversation with the president about it. He's like, tell me about tariffs. I'm like, they're bad. They're good. No, they're bad. They're good. We went back and forth for 30 minutes, and I have respect for him. He said, you know, Glenn, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I'm going to do it anyway. He likes tariffs. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt to try this plan because he's the president. But other than that, I don't know what else. I don't know what I would do. I know the elite's plan is not about restoring Main Street America and making it thrive. I haven't heard anyone else that had a big enough, bold enough plan to save our country. Will this do it? I don't know. But NAFTA was only the opening salvo in our transition to globalization, and that does not work. Next, I want to take you and unpack the China factor that made everything much. They said it couldn't be worse. It was. Next. There is an awful lot that feels broken in this world, and it is easy to feel powerless, like you'd love to do something, but you don't know what to do. So in the end, you don't do anything. You end up shaking your head and walking away from it all. But here is the truth. You are so powerful. You can do something, just something small that you will feel is meaningless, but it is not. The small right things, just taking the next right step, brings a lot of good into the world. You can be part of the change we all want to see. Right now, across the country, there are there are women who are facing. Are you saying that men can't get pregnant? Oh my gosh, I think I just said that. Yeah, they can't. There are women that are having unplanned pregnancies. Many of them are very scared. Many of them are buying into the lie that the best thing they can do is to have an abortion. That is a lie. The Ministry of Preborn is working to help so these women see it another way and know that they're not alone. They offer free ultrasounds and counseling and even postnatal help to help these women, to show them love and compassion, not judgment, not condemning them. But the majority of the time, that's all it takes to save a life. You can do good in the world by helping Preborn on their mission to preserve life, moms and babies. Dial pound 250. Just say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Glenn. That's preborn.com/Glenn. Sponsored by Preborn. Well, it looks like the decades of globalist fairy tales and shiny promises might be coming to an end with President Trump's tariff bombshell. The elites who benefited by far from the globalist system are now freaking out because their gravy train is it's running off the track and into the side of a mountain. And it's about time, quite honestly, because for far too long, this commitment to globalization has caused the slow, painful gutting of our core in this country, the middle class, the factory towns, the regular people who built this country with their own hands. Well, NAFTA kicked this slow decline off, but it was just the appetizer for a globalized free-for-all that followed in the 2000s. Even in his speech when he signed NAFTA, President Clinton seemed in a rush to get the globalization part of the plan.
A historic worldwide trade pact, one that would spur a global economic boom, is now within our grasp. We must not squander this opportunity. I call on all the nations of the world to seize this moment and close the deal on a strong GATT agreement within the next week.
Okay, so in the early 2000s, this new global trade strategy exploded, left American workers holding an empty lunch pail. And guess how much the trade deficit was last year with the European Union alone? $235 billion. That is not a trade deal. That's France, a surrender. Our trade deficit with Europe hasn't dipped below $100 billion since 2011. You sensing a trade here with all the trade deficit numbers? Does it make more sense now why President Trump is trying to reset the trade chessboard? Okay, so let me go back now to 1972. President Nixon comes, and he makes his famous trip to China, which is, a backwater nation at best at the time. The Chinese were riding bicycles, rationing rice. China was an isolated country international, much like North Korea today. It was a pariah. So Nixon goes and shakes hands with Mao, who probably had to wipe all the blood off of his hands first from murdering so many of his own people. And suddenly the door was cracked open for trade with China. Now, you could argue this was good. This was a decent Cold War strategy because it eventually helped bring down the Soviet Union. And it did, for a while, open China up in a good way. But no one could have predicted what cracking this door open would lead to. Fast forward 2001, another pivotal moment in globalization history. China joins the World Trade Organization. The WTO membership required China to lower tariffs, remove trade barriers, open markets, which created an explosion in trade with the U.S., but not balanced trade. Far from it. Hey, cheaper things coming your way. Stop. The year China joined the WTO, the U.S. imported $102 billion in goods from China. In 10 years, that number has more than tripled to $365 billion. And our trade deficit with China, it also tripled over the same period to $273 billion. Last year, the deficit was $295 billion, by far our largest trade deficit with any nation. And America's overall trade deficit with all countries was a record $1.2 trillion just last year. The fourth year in a row, we had hit a deficit over $1 trillion. So what is the fallout from this massively lopsided trade with China alone? Well, according to 2016, a study by economists at MIT, during the first decade after China joined the WTO, the growth of imports from China cost us 2.4 million jobs. 985,000 of those just from a factory floor. And get this, the study concluded, and I quote, "International trade tends to make low-skilled workers in the U.S. worse off, not just temporarily, but on a sustained basis." Now, how is that not plastered on the office walls of every congressman in Washington, D.C.? One of the study's authors explained, quote, "It certainly is the case that trade contributes to certain lower-priced goods and services, and on the average, it lowers the cost of living. But for a displaced worker, the fact that things are 10% cheaper at Walmart is not making up the fact that they are not employed. Trade should increase GDP on aggregate, but it's going to produce winners and losers." This is what Trump is talking about. For far too long, our leaders, especially on the left, have been way too comfortable with ignoring the losers in this equation. And who are they? They are the displaced workers that have gravitated now toward Donald Trump because he actually pays attention to them. The elites are like, whoa, where's all this discontent coming from? From the people in the middle of the country who you despise. That's where it's coming from. What does this displacement of American workers look like on the ground? I'll show you. It's America's Rust Belt. It's devastation. Let me show you a couple of things. Galesburg, Illinois, once the home to Maytag, a factory known as Appliance City. It employed 5,000 people. The last refrigerator rolled off the assembly line there in 2004. Now the site, just rubble and weeds. Youngstown, Ohio, once a proud hub of American steel, churning out beams that built our skyscrapers until China's cheap steel flooded in. Plants shut down, jobs vanished. Youngstown has lost 60% of its population since 1970. 50,000 residents left between 2010 and 2012. Gary, Indiana, used to be the site of the U.S. Steel's largest mill. In the 1970s, 30,000 people worked at that mill alone. Today, it employs 3,700. In the 1960s, the population of Gary was 180,000. Today, 68,000. It's an empty shell. The town has over 10,000 abandoned buildings. One town, Flint, Michigan, where you can set fire to water. It was once a major base for General Motors. The city has had 200,000 people in it at its height, 85,000 of them working at GM plants. Those plants closed throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s. The 235-acre Buick plant known as Buick City demolished in 2002. Today, Flint has a population of under 80,000 people. By 2018, over half the men aged 25 to 54, half were unemployed. In 1969, Detroit residents had higher incomes than Boston. By 2018, the people in Boston were 40% wealthier than those in Detroit. In the first decade after China joined the WTO, the U.S. auto parts industry, on the whole, lost 419,000 jobs. Even NPR said, quote, "The China shock created what looked like miniature Great Depressions in these places." But nobody noticed because nobody cares about the center of the country. Between the year 2000 and 2010, the U.S. lost over 5.5 million manufacturing jobs. That's the steepest drop-off in our history. Look at that. It is tragic. It is the draining of the American dream. All of this has caused the middle class to flatline. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, adjusted for inflation, this is going to kill you. The median household income in 2001 was $80,000. In 2023, the most recent data, the median household income is $86,000. 2.5 decades and an increase of income of $6,000. The cost of living has gone through the roof. This doesn't work. Meanwhile, check out this Federal Reserve chart. Ready? Over the same period that the middle class flatlined, corporate profits skyrocketed, 600% increase. Offshoring to China, slashing the labor cost, CEOs got fat while the U.S. factory worker gets a pink slip. Inequality is a gaping wound in America, and globalization just keeps pouring salt in it. This is the backdrop of Trump's current tariff battle with China. That's what he's trying to solve. You may not like tariffs, but at least he's listening and trying to do something. For 25 years, the arrangement has been great for China, and despite the insane trade deficit, great for a lot of U.S. corporations. But globalization, especially the China portion, turned American towns into ghost towns, broke families, crushed dreams, sold the backbone of our nation out. And what are people doing now? Drugs. Back in a minute. You've heard me talk about Patriot Mobile for a while now. You probably already know that for years, they have stood in the gap for every American who believes that freedom is worth fighting for. They are the real deal. So here's the question. Have you switched to Patriot Mobile yet? If you haven't, why? Why not? Maybe you're worried about coverage. Don't be. Patriot Mobile is one of the few cell phone company providers that uses all three major networks. If you have a cell phone service today, you'll get exceptional or better service with Patriot Mobile. Maybe you think it's just such a hassle. I'm here to tell you it's not. In fact, it's really easy. Patriot Mobile has their entire team based here in the U.S. So yes, they all speak English. They'll get you activated in minutes from the comfort of your own home, wherever you are. So there's nothing to wait for. You're going to save money. Join Patriot Mobile today. Support faith and family and freedom with every call and every text you make. Do it today. Go to patriotmobile.com/Beck or call 972-PATRIOT. 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code Beck. Get a free month of service now. patriotmobile.com/Beck. 972-PATRIOT.
We're going to have a booming stock market for a long time because we're reinvesting in the United States of America. And more importantly than that, of course, the people on Wall Street have done well. We want them to do well. But we care the most about American workers and about American small businesses. And they're the ones who are really going to benefit from these policies. Think about how many factories we've seen close down. Since NAFTA in the early 90s, 90,000 American factories have been closed down. That's small towns that have been blighted. That's millions of workers who have lost their jobs. That has to stop.
And that's your wheelhouse.
President Trump, that is my wheelhouse.
That's
I
where
grew
you're
up
from.
in a town where you had 10,000 great American steel workers, and my town was one of the lucky ones. Now probably has 1,500 steel workers in that factory because you had economic policies that rewarded shipping our jobs to China instead of investing in American workers.
So how dumb is our political and media culture? Well, I'm about to show you. After President Trump and Vice President Vance repeated the figure of 90,000 American factories that have closed in the past 30 years since NAFTA went into effect, the media raced to their fact-check mode to find out, is that number accurate? Here's an example. CBS reported, well, actually, the number 90,000, the number relies on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, and that was updated in 2021, shows the actual number of factories closed since 1997 was only 70,500, which, of course, kind of buries the lead that America has lost somewhere between 70 and 90,000 factories over the last 30 years. That's the story, guys. When the numbers are that insane, does it really matter? Either way, it's awful. The CBS report adds that those numbers include, quote, small factories with only a few employees. Oh, well, I don't care about, you're an elite, I'm an elite. Who cares? That is totally insufferable. As if it makes a difference whether a facility employs 5 or 500 or 5,000. These are people's livelihoods. These are towns gone. They're completely ignoring the point that these are not stats on a spreadsheet. They are heartbeats behind those numbers. How's this managed decline by America's ruling elites worked out for average Americans? Horribly. It has shattered communities in places that are too easy for politicians to ignore. Why do you think they don't go to places like Butler, Pennsylvania? Small communities all across America, once the backbone of our nation, have been hollowed out. Thousands of buildings resembling carcasses left to rot. So many of these businesses were the lifeblood of the middle class. So many dreams crushed under the weight of so-called free trade. Look, I'm a free trade guy. I like that. But I like my country more. With the disappearance of so many businesses and jobs, a lot of hope and purpose also disappears. And despair sets in. And guess what? When you have China pumping dope into our city, what do you think's going to happen? When they're coming across the border with fentanyl, what do you think's going to happen to these towns now? Managed decline. In 2017, 2 Princeton University researchers published their study on mortality and morbidity in the 21st century. One of their discoveries was that since 2000, the rising suicide, alcoholism, and drug overdose rate by Americans were triggered by job losses and worsening job prospects in the trade-exposed areas. I want to show you this graph. The red line is drug, alcohol, and suicide mortality rates of white Americans, men and women, in their 50s since 1990 compared with all other Western nations. What's different here? Since 1999, the annual number of overdose deaths from any kind of drug in the U.S. has multiplied 6 times over. America's deindustrialized heartland is the hardest hit. In Ohio alone, drug overdose deaths skyrocketed between 2001 and 2017, increasing 1,000%. Why? Because the hope of upward mobility used to be the key motivator in American life. I can do something with my life. I can make my life better. For centuries, that's what's driven immigrants to our shores. But globalization has steadily shrunk the American middle class, killing it. According to the Pew Research Center, in 1971, 61% of American households were middle class. By 2023, it was 51%. The middle class used to include a lot of manufacturing jobs. I've already shown you how those disappeared over the last 30 years. I hear over 70,000. But consider this. In 1950, manufacturing jobs made up just over 30% of total U.S. employment. By 2020, it was 8%. There are less Americans working in manufacturing today than in 1941, before the U.S. joined World War II. Even though our population has more than doubled. Think about that. Fewer manufacturing jobs today than 80 years ago with twice the population. Manufacturing jobs also used to be a viable pathway to the middle class for Black Americans, who make up a disproportionate share of Americans without a college degree. But from 1998 to 2020, globalization eliminated over 646,000 jobs for Black workers. That's a 30% of their overall employment in manufacturing gone. Meanwhile, CEOs, 290 times as much as the typical worker. That's their take home. In 1965, they made 21 times as much. CEO compensation has grown 1,085% since 1978. What did the regular worker get? 24%. They sold us globalization with the rosy promise that the rising tide would lift all boats. Turns out, no, mostly lifted the yachts that were already doing pretty good. And the regular people's boats, they were capsized or sunk. This is the context of the trade imbalance that President Trump has decided to attack head on. You got a better idea? Get elected. Let's do it. Post-World War II trade deals just propped the rest of the world up at our expense. Now it's time for us to heal ourselves. Trump's tariff strategy is a high-stakes gamble, the highest I've ever seen, but it's playing to totally change the field. It is the first real attempt in a very long time to address the imbalances that have eroded much of American strength. It is strategy. Again, I don't know if it's the right one. I argued with the president against it. But I'm telling you right now, we must reclaim American self-sufficiency or we're done. Now, I want to show you how much we've changed. I'm going to come back with a good friend of mine, Salena Zito. I think she's one of the best reporters in the country. What she learned at a recent visit to a steel mill in Pennsylvania is pretty eye-opening. We go there next. Joining me now is a good friend and journalist. In fact, I think the first journalist I ever grew to trust because she actually listens to people. And when she goes around to do her reporting, she does not drive the highways. She drives the back roads. So she actually talks to people. And that's why I think she's such a good reporter. She hears people. She's a reporter for the Washington Examiner. She is also an author of an upcoming book titled Butler, the untold story of near assassination of Donald Trump and the fight for America's heartland. She was just feet away from Donald Trump when they tried to kill him in Pennsylvania. Last week, Salena had a terrific article published in the Washington Post with the headline, "What I Learned About America First in a Pennsylvania Steel Mill." Salena, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. The first time I interviewed you was Philadelphia. You were working for a Philly radio station.
That's right.
I don't know why my station in Pittsburgh picked it up, and I was like, that guy's really interesting.
Salena, we're just going over some of the stats of what the president is doing. I don't think anybody is truly explaining how bad the situation is that he's trying to fix. And why he's taking such extreme measures. What did you find when you were in the steel mill in Pennsylvania?
So I have to first say it was such an honor to be able to go in and do that and spend the day with those men and women. They work really, really hard. And to see all the things that they do and that they make our lives better was really quite an honor. And so the problem for the steel mills, in particular U.S. Steel, once the largest country in the world, the world's first billion-dollar country, and it's very symbolic of the American ethos of hard work and building things that not only make our lives better but also protect us in times of conflict. This company has gone downhill for decades. Their peak was about 1970, and then things just started rolling backwards. And by the time of NAFTA, it just completely eviscerated this company.
So this was the steel mill, if I'm not mistaken, that a few years ago, Japan, I think, wanted to buy them, and everybody freaked out, and all the workers said no, and now the workers have changed their mind, right?
They have changed their mind. So initially, it was December 2023, and U.S. Steel announced that Nippon Steel was going to buy them. This is a Japanese company. And everyone did freak out. A Japanese company owning a company named U.S. Steel, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone was really, really upset. However, after these steelworkers, and I'm talking about management and union, rank and file, and the guys that are running the plant, they all started to do some work together, shoulder to shoulder. That's not always common. And they realized that if this deal doesn't happen, that these plants will go away.
Right.
These jobs will be gone. Because U.S. Steel has told them to their faces, yeah, we're not investing anymore. So that 86-year-old rolling mill that you just showed on the screen, Glenn, that'll be gone. It's 86 years old, and while it works like a horse, it needs to be upgraded so they can be more competitive and be more efficient.
So, as I was going through all of these stats a minute ago and talking about, jobs that have left, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, we can't bring the same jobs back. They're not going to come back. We would be building another ghost town for the future because of AI and everything else. So different jobs have to come back. But also, I would be led to believe, and you would have an answer better than I would on this, I would imagine that people would say, we don't want those jobs anyway. We don't want manufacturing jobs. I don't want to do that. Are Americans really in a place to where they wouldn't work at a factory anymore? That wouldn't be a good thing to bring jobs back?
No, absolutely not. Look, at our peak of manufacturing in this country, it was never more than 26% of Americans that worked in manufacturing. It was a sizable amount, but it wasn't everybody worked in a steel mill, right? And that is sort of what the goal is to be right now. It's much, much lower than that. Let's just think about this a second. What's the next thing that's going to boom in manufacturing? AI data processing plants.
Correct.
We need them. And you know what they need to work? They are thirsty for energy. Where does that energy come from? Places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, right? You're going to see, that's where we're going to see the manufacturing boom. But these are also jobs that are shoulder to shoulder with physicists, engineers, chemists, computer. I mean, it is a whole coalition of people. It is not just manufacturing. They just broke ground to do one in Pennsylvania, right down the river from me. 10,000 new jobs,
right.
$10 billion, and that's for AI. But that's not all of the jobs. It's just a portion of it. That's how it's always been.
I mean, my nephew said to me, I don't know, a couple of months ago, he's looking for a job, and he said, Uncle Glenn, I know you talk about, jobs and, what's coming, et cetera, et cetera. I just offered a job because he's a welder. And I said, take it, because they're talking about building power plants. And I'm like, welding will be around for a long time.
Yes.
We all these power plants, especially nuclear power plants, they're going to need those jobs. And I think we have to understand we're going to have to retool. Each of us, all of us, including people like you and me, we're going to have to retool every 2 to 5 years because the pace of change that is coming. Let me ask you, you talk to a lot of people, and I think people are freaking out right now about the moves that Donald Trump is making. Do you think people understand why the president is making these moves, why they're so dramatic and drastic, why he's not taking it slower? Do they understand how precarious our situation is right now?
Yeah, that's why they voted for him. So even people that I see that have been hit, by either they lost their jobs because of DOGE or their careers are uncertain because of the tariffs. There's a very different feel in the middle of the country. People look at it as, this might pinch now, but this is better not just for my kids, not just for my grandchildren. This is also better for my country. And it's been a long time since we've made sacrifices to do things for the betterment of our country.
Boy.
People, that's what Trump said to people, and they heard them. They heard him.
You don't hear that from the media. You don't get that from, that's why I like you as a reporter. You go out and you stop at the small coffee shops. You stop at the small gas stations. You're not driving the highway. So you actually talk to real people that are involved in their own towns. And you don't hear this in mainstream media.
Yeah, and I go in coal mines, which I just did, 1,600 feet straight down. I go on barges. I go in steel mills. That's where, and look, these are the people that decide elections, not the people that live in D.C. and New York. God bless them. However, they electorally do not decide elections. However, who has the loudest voice in media? People that live in New York and D.C. Okay, our cultural curators are wildly disconnected from the people who consume their news or sit in their seats if it's a corporation, right, or consume their goods. They don't understand, although I think I've seen a change. They don't quite understand the people that they're supposed to be serving, and that's including in government.
I know who Yuval Noah Harari is, the guy who wrote Homo Deus, Man God. He writes in many of his books that there are going to be millions upon millions of people that are useless people, his words. And he believes that we're just going to have to either drug them or hook them online to some sort of video because they'll be unemployable entirely. Is America ready for the challenge that is coming our way?
Well, I don't think America believes that that's actually what their greater purpose is. Americans are very aspirational. They want to be part of something bigger than self. And again, very different from if you and I go onto social media, we're like, whoa, I don't know anybody like that, right?
Right.
But the people that, that I talk to, that you talk to, they don't see their future that way. They see their future filled with purpose. And that's part of why a lot of them have moved from the New Deal Democrat coalition to the Obama coalition to eventually becoming conservative. And I've watched this for years on the ground because people do want to make things, whether it's physically or mentally. They don't want to be drugged.
Yeah. Salena, thank you for all of your hard work. And I can't wait for your book to come out. You were just feet away from the president when he went down on the stage. And you remained standing until you were tackled and put to the ground. We'll talk to you about that as we get closer to the book release. Thank you, Salena. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
God bless
Thank
you. We'll have more on this tomorrow. As I said earlier in the show, I'm glad I can explain it to you. I'm just glad I'm not the guy having to make the decision. This is a high stakes game. Good thing is we have a guy who plays high stakes a lot at the table. Good night.